Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and in this video I just want to give you a quick guide on how to improve your experience of tasting whiskey, not necessarily drinking it. I'm not going to tell you how to drink whiskey and other spirits, but I'm trying to give you an indication of how best to get better at tasting not just whiskey, but rum, gin, any other spirit, to try and give you the best experience that you could possibly get when you're trying new products in particular. I do a lot of tasting events. I had a YouTube channel called A Dram a Day where I was tasting a different whiskey every day for a year, and some people have kind of talked to me about it and said, you know, how do you come up with these tasting notes, and how is it that you're kind of coming up with these various descriptions? Because whenever I try something, it just tastes like whiskey or it just tastes like rum. It's not a particular skill. I'm not kind of pretending that I've got any kind of gift or anything like that. It's essentially drinking more different things as often as you can. It is absolutely not drinking lots on a night every night, but what it is trying lots and lots of new things as regularly as you can to have context against previous things that you've drunk. And the absolute best way of training your senses to pick out new things and kind of look at those nuances between different products is to try things blind. Because if you try things blind, you don't have any preconceptions, you've not got any prejudgments about what it is that you're drinking, and it forces you to actually really consider in depth what it is that you have in your mouth, at the risk of sounding a little bit crude. So I actually got given two samples by a good friend of mine, a gentleman called Andrew A.P. Butler, who has a vast collection of whiskies, and rather than just sit on them and look at them on the shelf, he is one of the fantastic people out in the whiskey industry stroke community that opens his bottles, sends out samples to various people in exchange for other samples to come back, which gives him and his friends an opportunity to try things that otherwise we never would be able to try. At October last year, so I'm filming this in January of 2021, and in October of last year, he actually sent me these two samples, which have got, you probably see, trick or treat on the label. No other indication as to what these are. And it was essentially a challenge for me to see if I could get anywhere close to kind of guessing what they are. And I thought it'd be a good indication, a good opportunity to basically kind of explain how tasting things blinds really helps you develop your palate and really helps you kind of consider what it is that you're drinking and look at kind of how best to explain it. And if you manage to do that on a regular occasion, it will actually help you kind of expand the vocabulary, shall we say, of tasting, and actually help you appreciate, hopefully, more new things rather than just drinking the same thing over and over again. What I'd recommend is if you have a liquor cabinet where you've got 5, 10, 15 bottles, however many it is, and you're kind of drinking fairly regularly, maybe a dram a night or every couple of nights, or even if it's just on a Friday, Saturday night, you like to have a couple of drams of something. If you've got a partner, wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, flatmate, whatever it is, just get them to pour you a dram of something. They don't tell you what it is, you don't see what it is, but they just pick something out of your liquor cabinet, and if it's a range of whiskies, if you've got, say, 6 whiskies on a shelf, just pick one of them, pour a little dram, and then get them to give it to you, so you've got no idea what it is, and see if you can guess out of your own collection that you know what's on the shelf, and you've tried them all, and you drink them fairly regularly. See if, with that knowledge, you can pick out which one of your collection that it is, because it's difficult. Trust me on this, it's not easy to go, oh yes, it's definitely that one. Because when you're looking at it blind, you're not thinking, oh right, well, I know this is bourbon cask, so I'm expecting some kind of creaminess. It is, you are looking at it absolutely fresh, and it's a really, really good way of forcing yourself to really consider what it is that you're tasting, what it is that you're picking up on the nose, on the palate, on the finish, and actually kind of really helping you go, actually, what is it I like about this, and what are these flavors that I'm getting? And if you're struggling with how to describe it, not a problem at all. Try and go back to things that remind you of it, and it might steer you towards what it is that you might be trying to say. So I tend to go back to things like childhood sweets or things that just remind me of something. So the most obscure nosing, not necessarily tasting, but the most obscure nosing note I ever had was on a Swiss whiskey that when I nosed it, it reminded me instantly, it just took me straight back to a very specific part of a specific ride in Epcot Centre in Walt Disney World. It meant that much to me, it was almost like it was there just by nosing it. If you know Walt Disney World, you know Epcot, Spaceship Earth, the Burning of Alexandria has a really, really smoky smell that they pump through, and it smelled just like that. Now, I was doing it on a video, and I knew as I was saying it, 99.9% of the people watching that video would have no idea what I'm talking about because they've never been there. But that whiskey has stayed with me for life. It evoked such an intense memory that I could almost feel myself there. That feeling, that sensation, what that little dram gave me emotionally will stick with me for ages. And I'm not saying every dram will do that, but it might be that there are some that remind you of something and it brings you back to a time or a place where you're like, oh God, it reminds me so much of that. It means nothing to anybody else, but it means something to you. And that's the most important thing, because what you're drinking, it's whether you like it and what that drink means to you, irrespective of what anybody else says about it. So you can get these sample bottles on Amazon or on the internet. There's a few places that specialize in selling bottles. Most of them are kind of like bulk buy, but you can get these bottles for anywhere between, say, 50p and a pound. If you've got a group of friends who've got a wide-ranging selection of whiskies, gins, rums, whatever it is, mixed spirits, really doesn't matter. Decant some of these in, put a code on it or just your name or whatever, send it to your friends. We're in a pandemic at the moment, so whatever way that it is that you can get it to your friends safely. So if you live locally and you just want to drop it outside the front door, or if you want to put it in the post and send each other a group, get on a Zoom call or get together when we can eventually get together in public, and then go through these, because one of you is going to know what is in that bottle and the other one aren't. And it's really good fun getting the tasting descriptions, the thoughts, whether people like it or not, and it will actually kind of like help you potentially describe some of the flavors that you might have been struggling with actually kind of getting into words, because other people might lead you down a path of, oh right, no, that's what I was getting out of it, I just couldn't quite figure out what it was that it reminded me of. And then you move on to the next one, and now you're in the position where you've got no idea, but the guy that was really struggling is now sitting there going, I know what this is, and you're way off the bat. I highly recommend blind tasting. It will really, really help you develop your palate, develop your senses, really help you kind of like look at spirits. And I'm not talking about whiskey, just whiskey, I'm talking about spirits generally. It will really, really help you kind of work and train your senses and yourself and what it is that you're getting from spirits, and hopefully make you appreciate them more. Now, last night I tried these two and I filmed it as a sort of, just to give you some kind of indication of what it is that I'm going through as I'm trying things blind. I've had an email back from Andrew, who has told me what these two are, and it is very interesting to say the least. So what I will do is cut into the tasting of the two that I had, and then I will cut back to me to be able to tell you what it was, because with my tasting notes and me trying it, it'd be interesting to see if anybody else manages to guess what it is, because I was close on one and actually closer than I thought it was going to be, way off on the other. So have a look, see what you think, and I'll be here at the end of it. Whiskey. So this is a trick or a treat, and I don't know which one it is. Right, so I'm taking a nose, I'm taking a deep breath, but not really sniffing a lot, but I'm trying to give it a good chance. I'm not just taking a quick sniff and that's it, but don't draw in too quickly, don't kind of like try and burn the nose hairs. Okay, so on here I'm getting caramel, toffee, take it away, let it linger, give it some air, then come back to it. Kind of saltiness, bit of sea salt, a little bit of black pepper, as though it's kind of like fresh black pepper ground. Bit of orange marmalade in there. Just let it develop as you're kind of going through there. Kind of go, right, I get orange marmalade, but is this something else? What else is there? Okay, I've got orange marmalade. Let's see if I can pick something else. Is there mint? Imagine other flavors and go, right, okay, is there mint in there? Well, not really, no, but there is an orange oil element to it. It's warming. There's a little bit of soft oak on there. But again, somebody might be looking at me going, well, what does soft oak smell like? Kind of like a woodiness that's in there, but quite subdued. Soft is not, it smells like a bit of oak that you can put your fingers into. It's an oakiness that is soft in terms of the intensity of it. It's a softly intense woodiness that's in there. It's very pleasant. That nuttiness is coming through a bit. There's a little bit of pepperiness on it. But actually it's really pleasant, so I'm hoping this is the treat. Now some people will take it in the mouth and draw air as though they were drinking wine. I tend not to do that. I tend to sort of chew it a little bit and kind of push it with my tongue to try and move it around my mouth. And don't just let it go straight down your neck, but don't gulp it down either. It's better if you can let it slip down your throat rather than actively swallow, because that's kind of tightening your muscles up and you're not really getting the most out of it. That oranginess really comes through. There's a lovely, rich, kind of almost sherry-ish mouthfeel on there. Now, this is where I would then start to look at like the alcohol content. And again, judging the alcohol content is one of those where you will get the hang of this the more you are drinking. And I'm not talking about the more you drink in one night, I'm talking over time. You know, 1 shot, 2 shot, you know, you've got to drink responsibly, but it is one where if you're drinking different things, you can then go, oh, right, so that was 50%. And yes, there definitely is a burn in there, whereas that is 40%. And I've sort of found over time that I've become better at doing the alcohol level. Now, sometimes I can be well off and it can be a cask strength that I thought was 43 because it's just got a lot of other flavors in there. But this is, I would say, about 45, 46. There is a little bit of alcohol content in there over and above what would be a 40%, but it doesn't come across as cask strength. There's a lovely weight to it. I really like, I think this is probably sherried. Maybe there is a fruitiness in there, but there is also like a vanilla character. So bourbon casks tend to give you like a creamy vanilla character, whereas sherry casks tend to give you like fruitcake elements. It's that oranginess that's kind of throwing me though, because it's straddling halfway between what could be bourbon, what could be sherry. The woodiness that's on the nose wasn't there initially, but is now starting to come through, and it's a little bit harder than the softness that was on the nose. It's a little bit more prevalent. I'm gonna go with sherry casks rather than bourbon. So I'm gonna go with Scotch. I'm fairly confident that Andrew's given me a Scotch. And it's got a Scotchy feel to it. It doesn't feel like a world whiskey. It doesn't really feel like any one of these that have got like their own character. And it definitely doesn't have this American whiskey vibe of kind of like rye or corn or anything like that. This has got that malted barley feel. It's a kind of milk chocolatiness coming through there as well. But in terms of regions of Scotland, now it used to be that a lot of places were saying, well, Highland tastes like that, Speyside tastes like that, Lowlands tastes like that, and it's not so much the case now. A lot of Scotch whisky distilleries are basically concentrating on their own flavour profile and their own character, and that might not fit in with what one would consider a Highland style. As a rough rule of thumb, yeah, Speyside sort of can fit into one category and Highlands can fit into another, but Highlands go from anywhere for like Wolfburn, Old Pulteney right at the top, all the way down to Glengoyne, that sort of area, and we've got Oban, we've got a lot of distilleries on a big geographical area, whereas Speyside is fairly succinct. Lowland, there's not many distilleries. The islands, all of that lot, they're all quite contained, whereas Highlands is really quite broad geographically as well as a flavour profile. Not sure this is a Speysider, but it sort of feels like it's not north, it's not Old Pulteney, there's not that kind of like slightly coastal element. So it could be somewhere kind of like central Scotland that's not necessarily Speyside. It doesn't quite have the toffee elements that I tend to associate with Speyside generically. Now this is where you start to go down a cul-de-sac, because if you had 5 bottles on your shelf and somebody gave you a sample blind, you would then be like, right, okay, well, I do get a bit of a toffee note in there and there is a kind of maltiness, so maybe it's a Speyside, right? What have I got on my shelf? Well, I've got 2 Speysiders, so it's probably one of those 2, and it turns out it's one of the others and you had absolutely no idea. So this is the danger, but this is also the fun of it. I've got no idea what this is. This is not necessarily something that I sell in my shop. It could be something that I've not even drunk ever in my life and it's completely new to me. So I've never had it before, so I've got no way of being able to tell what it is. But the fun is seeing how close you can get. And ultimately, the most important thing is, of anything that you're trying, whether it's blind or you know what it is, do I like it? And I really like this. This is definitely the treat. If this is his trick, then either there's something wrong with me or his trick actually isn't that tricky. I think this is really good. It's brilliantly balanced. There's a lovely weight to it. I think it's about 46% I'm going to go with. I think it's Highland. I'm going to go with a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. There's a fruitiness, but there's also a creaminess there as well. I think it's absolutely delicious. In terms of age, it's not young, but I don't think it's massively old. Maybe 15, maybe even as far as 18-year-old. I wouldn't have gone like above 20-year-old, but some kind of, I don't know, 15-year-old Highland Scotch It's really good though, so I do want to know what this is. Absolutely lovely. Right, so I'm going to do the other one, which, if that was the treat, I'm fearing is the trick. Get some water, swill your mouth out. Right, so let's go with what I fear is going to be the trick. So on the nose, very different straight off the bat, and that is why also doing blind tastings, if you can do a couple in a row, and actually, I haven't got any in the glass, but if I'd left some in there, be able to go, right, okay, that's malty, that's quite rich, that's got that woodiness, and then you can compare between the two. That really helps you pick up the differences. So don't be drinking the same thing over and over again. Keep trying new things, because it's allowing your senses to not only pick up new elements, but also then compare with something else to go, oh right, okay, so that is slightly oaky, malty, bit of orange marmalade on there. On this one, very salty, really marine-like. There's some citrus coming through there as well. There's a weird kind of citrusy sweetness as well, but it's very, very different to that. And being able to do one and then the other, you're getting an instant reaction. Whereas if I was just drinking this all night, I'm not getting probably as much out of it as if I was by comparing it to something else. So yeah, there's a weird marine note to it as well. Now, I don't know if this is Scotch, to be honest, because the nose is really unusual. There's a very slight earthiness to it, but that kind of came and went, so that might just be me not quite getting it right. There's like a weird kind of meatiness to it, but meatiness is the wrong word, and that's fine. If you're trying to describe something but you can't quite get there, not a problem. Try and describe it. You might end up kind of via a roundabout way actually get to what it is that you're trying to describe. And it's not meat, but it's, I don't know, it's like sea salt and marine and fish. It's so unusual. There's citrus in there as well, but it's a really light kind of lemoniness. Such a weird nose. Kind of pleasant though. I actually quite like it, but that's why I'm not thinking it's Scotch, because it's not got the peatiness, the smokiness of an Islay. Now I'm getting hay. There's a slight floral element to it as well. It's quite pleasant, but it doesn't remind me of any Scotch I've come across at all, which makes me think it's like a world whiskey. It makes me think it's somewhere really unusual. Not Asia, maybe kind of like a Scandinavian one. I don't know why I'm thinking Scandinavian. Almost like candy floss sweetness, but then there's this saltiness as well. It's kind of sweet and savoury at the same time. It's an interesting nose, and I think it's pleasant, but it's a bit weird as well. Oh, what? Right, so nose actually quite pleasant. There. Oh. Right, so on the nose is quite pleasant. On the palate, it's really peppery, quite peppery to start with, and salty. And that's kind of like, it's like salt and pepper on fish and chips. And that's leading me somewhere, because it started off quite marine-like, and it kind of was like, oh, actually, you know, there is a bit of a sea salt character to it. Is it actually Scotch that's like Old Pulteney or something like that? And it died down a bit, and the sweetness came through. But then I got this weird burst about 5 seconds in, and it was really strong, of like roll mop herring. It's like this weird intense fishiness, and it came and went really quickly, but it was absolutely there. And it sort of died off, but I'm still getting this intense saltiness, and it's a very marine saltiness. It really is very coastal. But that's not there on the nose. And again, the nose has changed again. It's so, I really like the nose, because it's doing lots of different things, but I'm almost afraid to try it again. This is definitely the trick. This is not the treat. This is absolutely bizarre. I really like bizarre things, but this is kind of bizarre in a slightly unnerving way. Let's see if it does it again. Right on the lips, really salty, like it's got sea salt in it. Then peppery, dies off a bit. Oak is coming through now. And it's almost like when you swallow the second time, you get this burst of sea salt. See, that weird roll mop herring burst didn't come through this time. I'm getting nothing but salt. Now, I had last year I found somebody on Twitter who had spotted a bottle of cooking whiskey. I think it was like 3 litres or a litre or something like that. It was in Ireland, I think, and it was cooking whiskey, and it had sea salt and pepper in it, and it was whiskey that was used, as it says on the label. It was basically like a plastic bottle, I think. It was for cooking. It was whiskey for cooking, not for drinking. And I was like, mate, I've got to try this, and I might do another video on it to kind of demonstrate what it's like, because he sent me a sample of it. I got 10 cls of it, and you could see the salt and the pepper actually floating around in the whiskey. It isn't for drinking. It's not for consumption. It's not dangerous. It's just not pleasant to drink, and it does taste awful, because it is literally like really, really bad cheap whiskey with salt and pepper in, so that when you cook with it, it gives you a bit of a whiskey flavour. And it reminds me of this, but it's not as intense. So this might be some kind of cooking whiskey, because Andrew's probably seen the video that I did for it, or saw that I'd mentioned it, and has found it's. I don't think it's the same one, because the one I had was darker, and it doesn't look like there's bits in it. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is a whiskey that isn't actually officially sold, or is not made to be in a shop like mine, but is actually like an industrial whiskey for cooking. So they've added some other flavorings into it to work with cooking, because there is this weird saltiness in it, and it's like a fishy saltiness. It really does remind me of kind of, not fish and chips, it's roll mop herring is what's going through my head. It really is. It reminds me of going to Scarborough and seeing those stands where they've got those little polystyrene tubs of whelks and cockles and crab and herring, and it's that sort of fishy saltiness that's coming through on there. And what's making me think that is, as soon as it hits my lips, it's like I've licked salt, actual table salt, right there on my lips. It's really, really unusual. I kind of like it. It's unlike anything I've had before, which for me is a good thing, because this probably will stand out. I'll probably remember trying this for the rest of my life. Like the worst whiskey I've had to date, which is Fujikai, I will remember the 2 times I had that for the rest of my life. That will stay with me forever. And this probably will as well. This is not as bad as Fujikai. This doesn't taste like Baby Sick, which Fujikai did. Now, there will be people now that say, hang on, you've said it tastes like Baby Sick. When did you eat Baby Sick? I haven't, but it's that when you smell it, you get a taste at the back of your throat. It's like diesel. When people say it has a diesel note to it in terms of the flavour, you get a sort of taste at the back of your throat when you smell something really strong, and it's that kind of element that we're talking about here. This doesn't have that slightly sicky throat. Okay, instead of it tastes like Baby Sick, it tastes like when you burp and a bit of sick comes up. That's what Fujikai tasted like. It really did have that kind of like acrid, like really horrible taste. This doesn't have that. This is nothing but salt, really salty. On the nose, it's citrusy and salty, and on the nose, I wish it tasted like it did on the nose, because on the nose, I think it's really, really nice. I really like it. But on the palate, it's salt and cracked black pepper, and then it dies away, and you get some oak, and there is also this weird fishy element to it, which is really hard to describe. So I don't think it's Scotch. I think it's, and I'm going Scandinavian, which seems slightly, not racist, but it seems like they're kind of associated with salt and fishing and everything like that. That's the kind of vibe I get, is this kind of like Scandinavian, like Swedish or Danish or something like that. But it's not, my guess is it's not a whiskey that is supposed to be actually kind of like sold to the general public. This is like an industrial whiskey used for cooking. That is my guess. I've got a little bit left. I might as well finish it. Weird. Really, really weird. Right, so I'm going to sign off. I'm going to email Andrew and find out what it is, and then I shall come back and I shall tell you. Right then, so very interesting. The first one I thought was absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoyed. The second one I really struggled with, and like I say, at the time I was not convinced that this was actually a whiskey of some form that was made available to public, but it turns out that it is. So the first whiskey, the treat, and it definitely was a treat because I absolutely loved it. Here's the picture of what it is. And it's a Deanston 1991 vintage. So from recollection, I think I was looking at about sort of a 15, 17-year-old. And no, it's not. It's actually a 28-year-old. bottled at 45%, so pleasingly I wasn't too far off the ABV on that, and it is a Highland distillery as well. Now interestingly, this one's been finished off in Muscat casks, which is a dessert wine, so that kind of rich sweetness that I was picking up from it is a result of that cask. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. You're looking at about 285, 300 pound a bottle, so it's not cheap, and it's incredibly generous of Andrew to actually send me a sample of it, but I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. Really, really good. Now the second one is actually a whiskey, not available anymore. It's kind of a one-off limited run, and it's something very attractively called Fishkey. It turns out that this is a bottling from a company called Stupid Cask. It's a German company, so their website is stupidcask.de, and this really is kind of taking that name literally. So it's a Bruichladdich that was distilled in 1992, bottled in 2007. So it's a 14-year-old Bruichladdich that was a combination of bourbon and sherry casks, and they actually split the batch. So one of them was just bourbon and sherry casks and then bottled. The other one, which was the Fishkey version, was then finished off in casks that had previously held salted herring, and it was put in that cask for 3 months as a finish. Now, in Scandinavia, particularly, fish were kind of stored in casks, so this is a really, really weird bottling. If you search Fishkey on the internet, there's a few places that say it's the worst whiskey ever. I don't think it is, but I do have a little bit left in the bottle, and what I'm going to try and do is see if I can get a sample of what I consider the worst whiskey I've ever had, and I've also got something else that I think could certainly be interesting to face off against this. So I've got potentially 3 samples to do an ultimate worst whiskey in the world showdown. But I kind of enjoyed the nose. I thought the nose was really nice. It was on the palate that saltiness came through and that fishiness. So I was getting a fishy element, and that was what was kind of throwing me, because whiskey, Scotch whiskey in particular, I mean, I didn't even think it was Scotch, but whiskey in particular shouldn't really have a fishy element to it. Now, there are some really unusual ones. There's an Icelandic one called Flurky that's kind of filtered through sheep dung, which is really, really unusual. I'd kind of gone for Scandinavian, and no, this is apparently German, but it does have a Scandinavian influence in terms of the herring casks. But it was such an unusual, weird, pungent, salty flavour that I genuinely thought that this wasn't actually a whiskey for public consumption, as it were. It was more of a cooking whiskey. But that is the fun of trying things blind. You have no idea what it is you're about to try. Sometimes you can be given something and you've got no clue what it is, and you think, oh, this is actually quite good, I'm really quite enjoying this, and it turns out it's something that you otherwise would never have touched. And this works with gin, it works with rum, it works particularly well with like flavoured drinks. So if you get a selection of flavoured gins and rums together and try them and try and figure out what flavour it is, that is helping you really kind of consider what it is that you're tasting and what flavours you're picking up. If you have a small shot of one and then another, and keep the first and the second that you've gone and go back to them, you're starting to then readdress what it is with the first and second, because you've then got a comparison with the third and the fourth. So please drink responsibly, but do look at trying 1 or 2 or 3 shots in a row, not shots necking it, but literally consider it, taste it. Okay, right, I get this flavour profile. Move on to the second. Okay, this is slightly sweeter, it's slightly mellower, it's deeper, it's softer, it's richer, it's harsher. However it works out, then go to the third and go, oh, actually, you know, I really like this compared to the first one. But then go back to the first one and go, oh, actually, no, I didn't think I liked the first one, but actually now I do, because I've sort of, you know, my palate's developed a little bit and I'm getting a bit more out of it. So play around with it, experiment, have fun with it, but absolutely do as many blind tastings as you can. Have fun with your drinking. Don't drink too much, but drink different things, drink new things, get in touch with friends and share some samples and share some interesting things, and just appreciate the vast array of spirits that are out there and waiting for your attention. Because if you can try a little sample of something in exchange for a sample of one of yours with a friend, rather than forking out for a full bottle and it turns out you're not that keen on it, if you've managed to get a little sample like this and you're not that keen, that's all you've wasted. And actually you can use that to go, well, I didn't like that. What was it I didn't like about it? Okay, anything that maybe has that kind of flavour profile or is of similar production style might steer clear of it, or I'll just try it before I buy it. And that's what shops like me are for, to enable you to try it before you buy it. just to make sure that actually, yes, this is what you want. So have fun, stay safe at this point in time, and I shall see you in the next video. Cheers.